Buenos días a todos. Antes que nada, un anuncio para aquellos que requieran de traducción simultánea, pueden pasar por el equipo que se encuentra fuera de la sala. Nuestro conferencista magistral impartirá su conferencia en inglés. Es para mí un gusto poder presentar a nuestro conferencista magistral, el primero de este evento de 3 días, el profesor Mark Dodgson, quien es una reconocida autoridad en temas relacionados con el tema de innovación tecnológica en las empresas y política pública. Una breve semblanza de Mark es la siguiente. Él es profesor de estudios de innovación en la University of Queensland Business School, profesor visitante del Imperial College London, ha escrito numerosos trabajos relacionados con el tema de innovación. Forma parte de cuerpos colegiados de diversas compañías, entre ellas distintas startups, lo cual realmente creo que es interesante para nosotros que como universitarios muchas veces buscamos impulsar este modelo. Entonces, el profesor ha enseñado temas de innovación por varios años y ahora pues la presentación o la conferencia magistral que nos impartirá la ha titulado Research in Innovation Management, Past, Present and Future. Con ustedes, el doctor Dodgson. Muchas gracias.
Buenos dias. It's very nice to be back in Latin America. I always find that the people I meet are the friendliest in the world and also the keenest to learn and to share their experiences on innovation. I'm going to be talking about innovation management today, mostly about, of course, what goes on in firms, but it's very important for policymakers too to understand what is changing in firms and how firms innovate. And I've been studying innovation since 1974, a very long time. And this period now of change in the way that firms innovate is the most rapid and the most disruptive I've ever seen. And we have to understand exactly what the implications will be of these rapid changes. I'll come on to those, but I'm going to start with the some history. Before I start, I'm going to talk about how innovation has changed as a subject for study. When I started studying innovation, there were very few people who were interested in studying it. Now, it's a core curriculum in many areas, and there are distinctive academic journals, there are departments, there are academic posts, there are postgraduate degrees and undergraduate courses. There are think tanks that work on innovation, international conferences such as ALTEC, and there's a growing literature. I think the first place I'd like to start is just to say what a rich subject it is that we are studying when we study innovation and innovation management. And you can think of some of the core aspects of innovation. These are not exclusive, but there are the core areas where we're looking at issues such as research and development, new product and service development, intellectual property rights, operations and production, and design. These are some of the core elements. But there are other influences around these areas that we study. We study organization structures and how they change. We study human resources, matters of skills related to innovation. We look at innovation processes and how innovation projects are managed. We look at strategy, how companies develop overarching perspectives and plans for innovation. Collaboration is a major feature of innovation, and we study that. And of course, marketing, and the information that marketing brings to how we innovate. So already it's a very diverse and rich subject. But then we start thinking about some of the disciplines, the academic disciplines that can influence the way we think about innovation policy or innovation management. We think about political science and the role of government policy regulations, the role of institutions and how they affect what goes on in firms. Sociology tells us about power within organizations and between organizations. Organization theory tells us about how new fields develop and their institutionalization. Psychology teaches us about motivations, why people are motivated to innovate. The study of law teaches us about contracts and about intellectual property rights. Strategic management teaches us about leadership and decision-making and governance, the structures of governance. Science and engineering tells us about the new options that we have to be able to innovate. Geography tells us about the location and space issues related to innovation. Economics, of course, about allocation of resources, creation of wealth. And history tells us, as we shall come on to, a great deal about how, why, and what happened in the past. So already we see this is a very, very rich area of study. And because it's so rich, I think we have to be very careful in defining what it is that we're doing. Now, last year, a publisher, Routledge, came to me and asked me to select my 100 favorite papers on innovation and put them into 4 volumes. Foundations, concepts and frameworks, important empirical studies, current and emerging themes. And this was great fun. I enjoyed it very much, refreshing my memory about some of the things I'd read many years ago and thinking about some of the core issues confronting innovation management today and in the future. Now, unfortunately, Routledge are a commercial publisher, and they charge £1,000 for this book, which is at 25,000 pesos, I think. So not many people can afford it, only very rich libraries. So what I've done is I've condensed all of the lessons that I took from those 4 volumes into one small book, which is coming out next year, called Innovation Management, a Research Overview. So this is a very, very short book, trying to pull together all the lessons I've learned from those 100 papers. But even so, in a small book, these are the concepts of innovation management that are in that book. So they'll be recognizable to many of you, and many of you will be researching or studying or using these concepts. But again, it emphasizes what a very rich field of study we have. And because it's so rich, because it's so diverse, we have to ensure that we're clear about on what basis we are doing our research and what literature we are contributing to. We need to anchor, we need to connect our research historically and theoretically. We have to be clear about where we're coming from when we study innovation and innovation management. And we have to build on what is known. These are some of my innovation heroes. We recognize some faces there. I've had the good fortune to work with 4 of them. Although I'm very old, I didn't have the opportunity to work with Karl Marx or Joseph Schumpeter, I'm afraid. But I've worked with 4 of them, and in my view, these are a pantheon on which we build our study of innovation and innovation management. And we have to relate to them. We have to understand the historical context of the work that we do. So this is the work of 2 of those great people, Chris Freeman and Carlota Perez, where they talk about the historical waves of technological development, these big techno-economic paradigms that have occurred since the Industrial Revolution, and how each wave of revolutionary change has brought new opportunities for economic development and for international competitiveness. And we're now in a new era, an era of fundamental change brought about changes in digital technology and biosciences. We also have to understand how the innovation process is changing over time. So when Thomas Edison was the first person to move to create a corporate type of organization for research and development in the 19th century. He was very autarkic, he was very self-contained. As the corporate labs grew in the 20th century, there were these great big institutions like Bell Laboratories, employing tens of thousands of scientists and being quite autarkic again in their research and development. But now we've moved to a distributed era. We still have the entrepreneurs creating the new ideas. We still have the corporate laboratories with their scale and resources. But innovation is more distributed, many more players involved. Small startups, universities, consulting companies, all contributing to innovation in a very connected way, much more connectivity than in the past. Just to give you a flavor of what we can learn from the past and how important it is to reflect on the past, I'm going to take a little diversion and talk about my absolute #1 innovation hero. To my mind, the greatest innovator of all time. I'm often asked, who is the greatest innovator? Is it Bill Gates? Is it Steve Jobs? No. It was this man who lived in the 18th century in England, and he was a potter. If you haven't heard of him, he's very famous in the UK. If you're famous, you have a statue, you have a museum, you're on a postage stamp, and you can't really see it, but there's a shop in Harrods, the famous shop in London. Harrods has got a Wedgwood store now, 230 years later. So he's a famous man. What did he do? Well, he innovated across a whole range of different areas. He developed new ceramics, he developed new materials. So he undertook research and development in a very systematic way. He developed some of the most innovative new ceramics since the development of porcelain in China. That's a picture of his factory, at the time the most advanced factory in the world. People from all around the world would come and see this remarkable factory that was very efficient. He developed an international supply chain for his raw materials. He bought China, the clay, to make his products from China, from Australia, and from, as America didn't exist then, he did it deal with the Cherokee Nation, the Indian nation, to bring global supply into his products. He innovated in organization. Bear in mind, this was right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. There was no such thing as management discipline. And he introduced management discipline, and he understood the division of labor, and he really organized things very efficiently. He was an innovator in marketing. He distributed his goods in a very innovative way. He had very famous stores in London where people would queue to see his latest collection. He delivered to houses and had sales. All these things were novel at the time. And he developed an ecosystem of firms around his firm. Suppliers, designers, product developers. And now this area in England and Staffordshire is still a world centre for ceramics 250 years after he worked. So what I took from this remarkable man is that innovation is important in all these areas, and it's not good enough just to be brilliant at one of these. You have to be good at all of these different areas. As Schumpeter said, you have to work on products, processes, organization, supply, marketing. He also taught me about networks. He was a very avid networker. He had very close networks with friends and colleagues, and he had some distant networks with people who could help him think about new designs and new products. So if I was to take a selection of books from my shelf, contemporary studies of innovation, many of you will have these, these books would not be a surprise to this man, because he knew about this centuries before we were writing about them in the West. So it's important to remember our history. It's also important to state where we come from theoretically. And I'm going to say some comments later about what I mean by theory, because I think in the academic literature in this area we've got a bit of a mess at the moment about over concern about theory. I'll start with the idea of evolutionary economics. I think this is one of the bases of my understanding of innovation management. Evolutionary economics is a simple model where capitalism's great virtue is the creation of variety. From variety, you produce goods, services which are selected by markets or by governments. The successful ones go into propagation and feed investment into new variety. The unsuccessful ones, which are quite common, are failures, and this is Schumpeter's creative destruction. So the dynamic engine of capitalism is variety, selection, and propagation. So that's one of the fundamental bases for my work. Another is dynamic capabilities. And this, of course, is a very big area of study now, and it's all got quite messy and unhelpful in my view. But at its essence, it's really quite simple. It's about search, how you search for ideas through R&D, collaboration, whatever, how you create and capture value, how you adapt and learn, and you create this cycle. So this is a strategic management concept, and we have an economics concept. And these feed through to my understanding of innovation management. This is very busy, but I'll talk through it. So on the left-hand corner, unfortunately we've lost the top of the slide. The left-hand corner is evolutionary economics. The middle column is dynamic capabilities theory. And on the right-hand column is my understanding of innovation management. And there's very great similarity. They build on each other. So innovation management is about creating options. It's about searching for opportunities. It's about absorptive capacity, the ability to find ideas and bring them into the organization. It's about decisions on which innovations to select. Your strategic assessment and choices you need to make if you have a wide range of options. It's about configuring and deploying the resources that you have to be able to innovate, the resources and capabilities that lie in your firm. It's about accessing complementary assets. The assets are necessary to be able to get the returns to your investment in innovation. It's about capturing value, producing distinct advantages and creating intellectual property rights and so on, standards and so on. It's about building capabilities cumulatively over time and learning. The basis of all of these approaches is learning, evaluating your returns and reviewing your performance, continually learning. So all my work, so this isn't working. These are some of my books on innovation. And they all really fundamentally are based on that theoretical understanding. It's all led through, built on evolutionary economics, dynamic capabilities, and some related areas around it. But they're all clear, and they lead me on that journey. So the second area, because we're so rich in our understanding of innovation management, study of innovation management, I think my concern today is that I'm not sure if we're asking the big questions anymore. Maybe this is a result of the fact that editors of journals now require us to talk about more and more uninteresting and trivial questions. But the big questions aren't going away, and they're becoming more and more important. Are we basically getting any better at avoiding the sort of crises that we see, whether it's Bhopal or Chernobyl or thalidomide or floods or financial crises? Are we getting any better at being able to predict and deal with these? Obviously poverty is ill health, energy and sustainability. All these issues are hugely important. But are we really addressing those issues in the ways that we should be now? And do we understand the role of new technologies, which are hitting us really, really hard right now? Do we understand the impact of these new technologies? Green technologies, electric cars. It's great to have electric cars, but what about the production of electricity, and how's that going to produce? Because it's a massive user of water. So how are we thinking about this implication? Digital technologies. I'm going to say a bit more about digital technologies because they are absolutely hitting us very, very hard now. Nanotechnologies in health, and new materials, all sorts of things. That little dot on the finger is a Bible. All the words of the Bible are included in that. So it's phenomenal technology. Robots. How are robots changing the way we manufacture, the way we live at home? Biosciences, individualized health prediction and health plans becoming more and more powerful at being able to predict and prevent disease. Artificial intelligence, again, I'm going to come back and say a bit more about that. And neuroscience. So, for example, the way we can now move artificial limbs by using our minds, becoming quite powerful technology. All these technologies are we to expect further massive disruption? The disruption predicted by authors such as Martin Ford and Eric Brynjolfsson and his colleagues at MIT. Very pessimistic views about the way that robots are going to displace employment and put a lot of people out of work and change the way we manufacture things. And this is a very salutary picture for me. This is statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States, which shows the divergence between major sector productivity, the results that come from investments in technology and innovation, in large part, and the wages of workers. And to me, this, to a large extent, explains why there's an idiot in the White House, because people have been left behind. This is the big issue, and we as innovation managers, students of innovation management, have to think about the way that technology can deal with problems like this to make sure that people aren't left behind. So, a future research agenda. I think we need better theory development and better data. Let me say a little bit what I mean by better theory development and better data. I think that we've got ourselves into a bit of a mess in the literature in innovation management, that we are doing a lot of what Americans would call a cookie cutter kind of research, which just makes marginal improvements to existing knowledge. I don't think we're very adventurous when it comes to our new data sources. I'll say something about that. But our approach to publication is often, is there a gap in the literature? Well, that's a terrible place to start research. The best place to start research is, what is the problem? Is there a problem? How important is it? And what are we going to do about it? That's the place to start. And we've got ourselves into this sense of theory as being explanatory, as if we as social scientists in 8,000 words can explain something. We can't do that. And there's some very good work being done now by social scientists who are beginning to say that we need a different kind of approach to theory. Theories that not only explain, but theories that help us understand. Theories that help us categorize. Theories that help us produce new insights and understanding that we didn't previously have. So I think once we start focusing on problems and we're more generous in our understanding of theory, then we can start making some progress. Some of the issues that I think are particularly germane for innovation management at the moment is employment and skills. If we take, for example, the driverless car, it's a very important innovation. 1.3 million people a year are killed in automotive accidents. Devastation. They are, of course, responsible for a great deal of the pollution that we suffer from. Electric cars, clever digital cars, will alleviate that devastation. But what is the largest employment category in the United States? It's drivers of trucks and vans and taxis. So 2 million people. Are they going to be made redundant? If they're made redundant, who are they going to vote for? They're going to vote for Mr. Trump. So it's a great consequence that we need to think about these technologies and their implications. And we need to think about how, I'll just use an example. A friend of mine has a Tesla car, and it had a problem accelerating up a hill. In the past, if you had a problem with your car, you'd take it to the local garage, where local employees would help it and fix it. They'd buy components and they'd mend it. His problem got solved by a software download sent overnight, and all the money flew to Silicon Valley. Nothing local. These are profound problems that are going to affect employment levels and the kind of skills that are needed in the new economy. Complexity, complex systems. We need to think much more about how complex systems, such as what goes on in cities, the cities that we live in and love, which are blighted by problems of transportation and congestion and pollution. We need to think about how innovation can operate in these complex systems and provide system-wide solutions. We need to think about policy and how policy has to be based on an understanding of what actually goes on in innovation. Too often, policymakers are developing policies for a model of innovation that's 30 or 40 years old. They have to be attuned to contemporary issues in firms, contemporary issues of innovation. And it's very hard because, as we see in the regulatory sphere, it's very hard for regulators to keep up with what's going on with the Facebooks of the world and Twitters when it comes to issues of fake news and so forth. Ecosystems and how ecosystems are evolving, coming back to this distributed nature of innovation, how there are many different players involved, and often even the most powerful company is not in control of the ecosystem, and they have to manage that ecosystem. It's fascinating for me. I spend a fair amount of time studying a major services company in the UK, the largest professional services company in the UK. And it used to be based on audit, which was just accounting, and 70% of the partners, the people who own the company, work in audit. But artificial intelligence is killing audit. It can be done by machines, not people anymore. So they have to fundamentally transfer what it is they do in that services company and drop audit and start becoming a technology company. And when they're a part of that technology company, as a technology company, they realize they're not in control. They have to share what they're doing. They have to collaborate with everyone. Entrepreneurship, another incredibly important issue. But I think we've reached the time where we need to move beyond just studying how we create more firms. We know an awful lot about how to create new firms. What we don't know about is how to create firms that grow rapidly. Not startups, but scale-ups. How are we going to create those firms that are going to create the majority of jobs, the majority of productivity in the future? Innovation in non-traditional sectors. We need to think about innovation in NGOs and charities, governmental organizations. Organizations which in the past have been perhaps a little bit slow at learning some of the lessons from the cutting-edge companies that we know about. Environmental sustainability, of course, is crucial in all regards and has to be a major part of the future agenda. The new technologies being used to innovate. Innovation not only creates new technologies, but it is used to innovate. And I'm going to use an example in a minute, which is going to be very important. And internationalization. When When I started studying innovation in the 1970s, we were really looking at American experiences, what was going on in America. Then the 1980s, we looked at Japan, some instances from Europe. But now it's totally international. Good practice in innovation management occurs around the world. And what's going on in China now particularly is extraordinary in the extent it shows how quickly you can move from a position of being way behind in innovation to being a global leader in just a few years. So we need to think totally internationally about innovation management. Let me just say something about the digital transformation, because this is what is changing the ways we innovate more radically than anything I've ever seen in my career. The ability to have a digital basis for the whole innovation process, from the way we do the search, we do the R&D, through to operations, through to marketing, through to delivery, is very profound. Internationally, we see these extraordinary developments happening. So, for example, the use of the mobile phone in developing countries. There are now expected to be nearly 4 billion mobile phones in the world by 2020. But how many bank accounts are there? Well, there's 2 million. So having a mobile phone gives you access to the global economy. It gives you access to information. It gives you access to the resources, the potential to borrow money. In countries such as Kenya, this technology has transformed the economy by giving people the opportunity to get into the global economy. In India, we have this incredible development that's happened so rapidly, the digital identity card, the Aadhaar. It was launched in 2009, and it's already enrolled over 1 billion people. Many people in India didn't have any identity cards. They didn't have proof of where they were born or how old they were. So it was impossible for them to access social services or bank accounts or any formal organization, state organization. This card now gives them identity. So they've got an identity and they've got the means to be able to communicate. And this is opening up a revolution in entrepreneurial opportunity for people who were previously excluded. Companies such as IBM have been at the forefront of technology for decades, 100 years. Now, really, really struggling with how to be a technology leader. They've got phenomenal technology, computers such as Watson with their machine learning, their Internet of Things, their cloud computing, all these extraordinary technologies they're developing and often in the world forefront. But they're really struggling to understand how to be the leader across these technologies because the technologies are evolving so quickly. So even the mighty IBM is finding it hard in this new era. This is an example of a way that innovation, these technologies help the innovation process, change the innovation process. We did a study, some colleagues and I, of the replacement for the World Trade Center in New York. When the Twin Towers collapsed, more people died being stuck in the stairs than from anywhere else. They were trapped because people coming down met firefighters going up, and there was congestion, and more people died in the stairwells. So we were involved in thinking how technology could develop a better approach to getting people out of buildings in case of extreme events. And we worked with a company that did a lot of digital simulation of how people behave in fire, how smoke moves, how various structural elements change during fires. And by playing with these technologies and pulling them together, we came to the startling conclusion that if you have an extreme event in a tall building, the best way of getting people out is by using the elevator. Now, this is totally contrary to what we've all been taught. And I don't suggest we try and do that, heaven forbid something happens today. But because you need a special process of blowing the smoke out of the elevator shaft. But this was totally unexpected. For years and years and years, we have been told, in case of fire, do not use the lift. But the new technology showed us it's better to use the lift. Now, this is very innovative, and it's also very scary, because a lot of regulators, firefighters, insurers, occupants of the tall building would be very skeptical about this technology. But what the technology did is it allowed people to participate in a conversation about the technology, to interact with the technology, to allow them to put their particular point of view or display their expertise. And by using the technology, they came to a convergent understanding of the possibilities of the technology. So that the technologies, the digital technologies, are changing the way we innovate as well. And the final example I'm going to use is kind of unusual, but it's infrastructure. This is a big new train line being built across London, $20 billion, big project. And you think, okay, this is civil engineering, mechanical engineering. You just need to dig big holes and build a railway through it. But this is totally digitally designed and developed. So using sophisticated systems for planning, bearing in mind they had to build this railway in London in real time. This is going right through the middle of London, very busy, very congested, and they had to do this in a very planned and sophisticated way. And they used digital modeling the whole way. It's been very efficient, used very, very well. And they're now going to move to a digital railway. The whole railway system is going to be digitized. And what does this mean? What does it mean for the consumer? It means a very much more efficient way of transportation. So the digital passenger, we will know through our digital phone, through predictive data, we'll know exactly when we will arrive at our destination. We'll know exactly where the seats are available on the train. We'll have flexible pricing so that we can delay our travel to get a lower price when it's out of rush hour. We'll have access in this train to 5G internet. So totally digitally integrated. And I think this is important because one of the things I fear, and one of the things I've seen where governments have fallen down when they're talking about innovation, they get excited about the technology, they get excited about the innovation, but they should concentrate on what does the innovation mean for everybody? What does it mean for the citizens of the country who benefit from it? And not enough focus is on the consumer, the citizen, the person in the street, the voter for whom these innovations are going to matter. So innovation is changing a huge amount because of digital technology. And it's also affecting what we do in universities. I write a regular blog for the World Economic Forum, and this was one of the most favored ones. People like this one. It's on artificial intelligence in universities. Many of us work in universities. And we can think about some of the things that AI and blockchain and other technologies are doing. It's quite extraordinary. So Georgia Tech has now shown that using bots to tutor has a better effect than having students tutor other students, staff tutor. There's some research that shows that algorithms are better at selecting staff for new appointments rather than having HR and academic appointments committees. There's some research that shows that there are ways of creating hypotheses digitally through using big data and algorithms of all sorts that create hypotheses that are also then explored, which produce more adventurous discoveries than those generated by people. All these things are happening. They're now, Elsevier, the publishers, are now using these kinds of technologies, not only to see if people are plagiarizing in their papers, but predicting who's going to plagiarize. So these are transformations in our sector, in the university sector, that are going to hit us very, very hard. And we really need to appreciate it. So in this rich world, the final element I'm going to talk about is the need to be adventurous, the need to be ambitious. I feel in the future, we've kind of lost our way. We need to be bolder. We need to think about the power of data science. A lot of the most interesting work on innovation is now being done by data scientists, not innovation scholars. So this is a real-time map of every Bitcoin transaction occurring around the world. Anytime anyone uses a Bitcoin, it's registered here. You can see patterns. You can look at the diffusion of technology. You can look at the internationalization of technology through using this kind of technology, all developed by data scientists. This man is a biological scientist, but he has done a study of the entire history of popular music. He developed a database, and this is a record of the entire development of popular music. Again, showing extraordinary new insights into the diffusion patterns of an innovation. This is my next book coming out next year on play, the playful entrepreneur. And what I did with my colleague David Gann on this book is to look at some of the most successful entrepreneurs that we know, but past and present, and look at some of their characteristics and what makes them successful. What makes them successful is that they're very attuned to opportunity and prepared to take risks. They're quick to adapt and learn. They're keen to experiment and explore. They express their freedom through their work. They enjoy their work because they feel free to set their own agenda. And they have fun. I sometimes look around academics working in this area and I don't see a great deal of this. It's time we returned to this. It's time we were more adventurous, bolder, we were more experimental, and we had a lot more fun. So there's a need for more interesting research, more diverse theoretically, more adventurous in the data sources. Always a need for greater interdisciplinarity, and we need to have better impact on practice. We are not as connected as we need to be with companies and with policymakers. So, in conclusion, innovation has changed the world, and it's continuing to change the world. I think it's changing the world faster now than probably ever in history. So we need to understand how to manage it. We really need to understand what goes on in companies in order to make innovations real. There's a tradition in innovation management research in which we need to build. There's a lot of knowledge on which we need to build, and we need to tie our work to that, those structures, those bricks that have built the wall. But we have to account for changing reality. Because of issues like as digital technologies, we need more innovation in innovation research. And we have to get better informing companies and governments about what's going on in innovation, because they can't help. We need to help the firms and we need to help governments by exploring what is actually going on. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Muchísimas gracias. Creo que pone sobre la mesa varios puntos que inclusive creo que José Luis ya había leído tu presentación, ¿no? Se adelantó. Entonces, bueno, pues abrimos el debate al público. Si alguien tuviera algún comentario, pregunta para Marc. ¿No? Gabriela. Ahí va el micrófono.
Okay, thank you, Mark. My name is Kjell Larsen. I'm from Copenhagen Business School. So you have this quest sort of for more interdisciplinary research and so on, but one could argue that perhaps innovation research is the most interdisciplinary research field in social sciences. At least I would argue that you can draw on a lot of fields, and economics, sociology, political science, as you put it, and you still get published in good journals. So I think there's a good message in the first part of your speech. Then my second question, that has to do with the distinction between types of theories that would allow us to understand things better, as opposed to, I guess, explaining something or perhaps even predicting. So for me, I mean, I'm not sure I get this distinction, because for me, something, if we have an understanding, we will also be able to predict, but I sense here that there's something more subtle than what I think. Thank you.
Does this work? Okay. Thank you, Kel. I think the first point about us being interdisciplinary is good. We are interdisciplinary, but that poses its significant challenges, and I'm not as happy as you are at the ease of which we can get interdisciplinary work published in disciplinary journals. I think it's very hard. But I also think that we tend to get too easily sucked into silos, our own little silos of our own particular areas. And when we look for insights from other disciplines, we're much surprised that they can provide us new ways of thinking, new surprising ideas that we can use. So I'd still encourage, I think we've got a major challenge in increasing the number of journals that will publish our work. But I also think that we need to be much more adventurous and give people time to explore different disciplines and see the insights they provide. On the question of theory, I think that we're on the cusp of a backlash in publishing against the narrow-minded view of what theory comprises in the social sciences. And I'm thinking particularly of the work of people like Mats Alvesson and Jürgen Sandberg, and also there's a guy at Goldsmiths, David Serving, I think his name is. These are people who are saying that our narrow interpretation of what theory comprises of has constrained our imagination, and that when it comes to training PhD programs or writing our papers, we're too preoccupied with thinking about something that might be, in the end, rather irrelevant and not very useful. And that we downgrade or don't value work which provides startling new insights or surprising findings. And I think that we need to make that change, because I'm very depressed about the state of academic publishing in this area. We need a great deal of more adventure in our thinking. And there's so many interesting papers. I'm on the editorial board of 8 journals, and I ran one for 17 years. So I've seen the papers that come in, and they're boring. The ones that I publish, I always emphasize, do they say something new? Are they say something interesting, rather than are they properly theoretically located, whatever that means. So I think that's a balance. We need to change that balance.
Gabriela.
Okay, Gabriela Dutrenit, de la UAM. Fíjate que ahora yo leo toda tu presentación muy vinculada con la innovación empresarial, porque uno ha partido de la idea de que la innovación es un fenómeno de las empresas, ¿no? Sean ellas públicas o privadas, pero es un fenómeno de las empresas. La semana pasada en el Congreso de Globelix en Atenas hubo muchas presentaciones en la dirección de la necesidad de repensar el mismo concepto de innovación, porque bueno, uno encuentra innovación en el sector salud, innovación en los servicios públicos. Ya hoy mismo parte de la innovación en el sector agropecuario no se asocia directamente con una empresa, ¿sí? Entonces, o sea, como que da la sensación de que hace falta repensar un poco más el mismo concepto de innovación si lo dejamos, seguimos dejando pegado al sector empresarial, ¿sí? O si cambiamos por un enfoque más amplio de la innovación que cubre otras actividades. Me gustaría oír tu reflexión y quiero agradecer mucho que nuevamente hayas aceptado venir a compartir con nosotros tus ideas.
Thank you, Gabriela. You're absolutely right. Innovation occurs across the whole of the economy, the whole of society. And at the moment, for example, I'm doing some work on philanthropy, on giving, and there's enormous opportunity to bring innovation into philanthropy to make it more efficient. But when we talk about entrepreneurship, I think it's a mistake just to limit to that entrepreneurship in firms and small firms. Entrepreneurship occurs in large firms. Entrepreneurship occurs in large firms of all different sectors. It occurs in governments occasionally. It's very difficult in governments, but it does occur. It occurs in policy making. We see it in areas of health, for example, constantly. So I think we need to broaden our understanding of where entrepreneurship lies. And one of the indicators that I have is the ways that MBA programs have shifted over time from focusing on becoming a financier on Wall Street or work for a Coca-Cola, a large conglomerate, or to work for a large consulting company, has now moved. Young people now want to work on entrepreneurship. They want to work on startups. And increasingly, if you look at the data from places like Harvard, then they want to work on social entrepreneurship. They work on entrepreneurship to improve opportunities for people to improve their lives. So I think a broader definition of entrepreneurship is required, and it's certainly not limited to the corporate sector. It's everywhere. It's very, very hard to do in government, and we need to think about how to improve opportunities for innovation in government. There are ways of doing it, but it's difficult.
Ari, y después José Luis, por favor.
Hi, Ari Plonsky, University of São Paulo, Brazil. Thank you very much for your thoughtful presentation. You began, the first picture was Karl Marx. And obviously, if we all agree that innovation is changing the world for better as an average, there are winners and losers. You touched a bit on this point, but what type of dialogues are being opened between our innovation community and the other communities which are dealing with the issue of winners and losers, both in terms of in a society among nations and etc. You obviously mentioned the consequences, including somebody sitting in Washington, but what are the dialogues in order to overcome this phenomenon?
Thank you. It's a very profound question, and I think that one of the dangers that's happening in the world today is the breakdown of the institutions that facilitate such dialogue. And particularly dangerous is the American withdrawal from many venues where these kinds of important discussions are taking place. So I think it's incumbent on other pan-national organizations to increase their dialogue, to increase dialogue within Latin America, within the EU, within the Asia-Pacific region, and to find means of being able to communicate across those blocks. Because the threats are enormous. We've seen the consequences where in the West, where large proportions of people are disenfranchised. They have had no increase in their salary, in their income for decades. Their health is declining. They're angry. And the result is, we've seen it politically. We've seen it in America. We've seen it in Europe with Brexit in Britain, which is a stupid, stupid decision. And unless we address that inequality and start thinking about the way that the productivity gains that all the innovation we produce is creating is distributed more equally. So we need to think about how, as innovators, what does a driverless car mean? How can we create meaningful jobs around that? So what kind of maintenance support, software maintenance support is needed? What kind of energy sources are needed to be able to sustain them? more than that, I think it's reached the stage where we have to think of universal social wages, where people are, the West, United States, Europe, Australia, incredibly wealthy countries. And the disparity in wealth is increasing. So the rich are getting richer and the poor are standing still or going backwards. We have to think of mechanisms to be able to reduce that inequality. And I think the social wage is one example, and we need to think in countries where it's being used, how we learn the lessons from that and share those lessons around. And we might need to think about new kinds of institutional forms to be able to do that, because our global international forums at the moment are under threat.
José Luis Olleiro, de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. También quiero agradecer por su presentación tan estimulante y basado en las principales conclusiones que toma al final para tener una investigación en innovación, en gestión de la innovación más ambiciosa, más divertida. Yo quiero preguntarle cómo estructuraría un programa de investigación con esas características, con qué tipo de gente trabajaría, cómo sería la colaboración nacional, internacional, y algo muy importante, cómo difundir los resultados de esa investigación para que sean verdaderamente relevantes.
Excellent questions. We know from the study of innovation that failure is very common and that most innovations probably fail, attempts to innovate fail. Yet when it comes to studying innovation, we won't tolerate it. So I think we need to think much more about the ways that we support and reward people for sustained effort over many years, where they will have failures, but they will have eventually, hopefully, some successes. And that requires a different approach to tenure decisions, promotion decisions, and we have to broaden the metrics we use for success. So awful situation we find in my country and many other countries, that you're judged entirely on your publications record in a limited number of journals. Awful, dreadful, kills intellectual work, kills scholarship. So we need to have leaders in universities who are more prepared to be long-term in their thinking, less concerned with the ranking systems that preoccupy them, which are all to do with publications, and give PhD students and young faculty more time to experiment and to find their own way, to find their own questions, and encourage them to be ambitious and to think about the big questions rather than getting the 3 papers they need to get promotion or get. So it's an HR issue, it's a leadership issue, and it's incumbent on old grey professors to say it's all right to fail. I fail all the time. I'm always having papers rejected and always having problems. It's normal. And I'm very fortunate now that at my stage in my career I can do research whatever I want. Give that opportunity to young people, because they've got much better ideas than I do. They're much more attuned to the modern world and understanding the modern world than I do. So give them the freedom that I have. So those are some of the issues, I think. But they are very important questions.
2 intervenciones más, aquí por favor, y después Alexander.
Hola, buenos días. Soy Xavier Vence de la Universidad de Santiago de Compostela. Antes de nada quería felicitarle por su presentación y me ha resultado muy interesantes algunas de las reflexiones que dejó al final. En particular cuando afirma que el futuro de la investigación en innovación requiere de investigaciones realmente interesantes, buscando nuevas ideas y nuevas formas de abordar la innovación, y también la idea de que necesitamos más innovación en la investigación sobre la innovación. Me parece una expresión absolutamente clave. La cuestión que yo quisiera plantearle como reflexión en este sentido es que, bueno, hemos vivido, y lo ha contado con rapidez, pero de forma muy clara, toda una larga historia de innovación tecnológica muy potente, muy dinámica, que ha cambiado el mundo, que ha moldeado el mundo, que ha producido riqueza en buena parte del mundo, también pobreza en otra, pero que el problema es que al final nos encontramos con unos resultados que somos conscientes que cada vez son más graves e insostenibles, un modelo de desarrollo absolutamente insostenible en términos medioambientales, y lo que ocurre es que la lógica con la que venimos haciendo la innovación, la lógica con la que venimos buscando nuevas soluciones y la lógica con la que se selecciona el mercado, las nuevas innovaciones, es una lógica determinada, una lógica guiada por la rentabilidad y el corto plazo. ¿Cómo podemos hacer desde el campo de la innovación para modificar precisamente el sistema de incentivos, el sistema de selección de las innovaciones para que realmente puedan conducir a un mundo diferente, sostenible y también más igualitario, ¿no? ¿Podemos los innovadores intervenir más activamente y pensar más activamente en la innovación social, en la innovación de cómo se decide en la sociedad para que esa innovación tecnológica sea también una innovación que construya un mundo con futuro? ¿Cómo podemos hacerlo?
Again, very profound question. Very simplistically, I think capitalism is a great mechanism for encouraging innovation in many ways. But the problems with capitalism is two problems. Firstly, it doesn't deal with inequality, and second, it doesn't deal with environmental sustainability. And I think that those are two issues. I don't think innovation management researchers are going to overthrow capitalism tomorrow, and there's many reasons we probably wouldn't want to, because it can create incentives for variety creation and so forth. But we can start thinking about technologies that don't accentuate or reduce inequalities. So we can design technologies that engage people. So we don't think of artificial intelligence or machine learning. We start and obsess about the cleverness of the technology. We obsess about how we can use these technologies to augment the skills and capabilities of people and how they work. And on the environment, there's many, many things that we can do in improving environmental sustainability. But I think the key issue is really for our students and our young faculty to have the opportunities to think about how, when they're teaching innovation or researching innovation, what are they going to do to help the big problems, to help with the questions of, is this going to produce better jobs for people, give them more meaningful lives, as well as better health and less congestion in cities, all these sort of things. And the other major failing of capitalism, how do we manage to produce an environmentally sustainable future? So those are my simple-minded responses to your question and observation.
Alexander, la última intervención, por favor.
Okay, Mark, a great paper that you wrote about learning, that is one that we use very much in the courses in our master program. Learning became very important in the 80s and the 90s as well, with a lot of studies, case studies. I think with the work of Jorge Katz, it was pointed, it was maybe the kind of work that allow us to understand a bit more what was happening in developing countries. And then the studies of Spru about learning capability buildings. My feeling now is that learning is generally accepted that, yeah, it is important, but each time you see less and less papers tackling the problem of how organizations learn, how firms learn, and I don't know what you see is the future of this field of work, no?
Thank you very much. When I put up my theoretical foundations of evolutionary economics, dynamic capabilities theory, and the work on innovation management, underpinning all of them was learning. Learning is crucial. In the new era of machine learning, where machines are now capable of doing the most extraordinary things, absolutely extraordinary things. The ability to be able to predict is increasing so significantly. We have to think very carefully about what it is about human learning that's different from machine learning, and how we use the technologies, again, to augment what we do, how we manage to use the distinctive human characteristics of intuition, empathy, creativity that machines find harder to emulate, and how do we build on those characteristics of humans, and sympathy for others, sympathy, concern, love. How do we build on these in order to be able to further the things that we want to advance in society, the innovations that we want to deal with the problems that we've discussed? So I think it's still a very crucial issue, learning, but we need to think it in a different way, because machines, artificial intelligence, algorithms, blockchain, all these things are changing the ways that learning occurs. It's much more distributed, for example. So these are very profound questions, and I hope that it's part of an emerging research agenda here and elsewhere to look at the nature of how learning is changing as a result of these technologies.
Pues muchísimas gracias a Marc. Sin duda alguna pone pues una mesa de reflexión en esta primera conferencia magistral. Es cómo ser más creativos, cómo ser innovadores para seguir estudiando la innovación. Muchísimas gracias, Marc, por tus contribuciones y por ponernos estas ideas sobre la mesa. Gracias. Los invitamos al café y por supuesto que ahí también podrán abordar al profesor Marc para aquellos que se quedaron con alguna duda o comentario. Gracias.